Hi guys, Tracy here. Today I'm going to be scrapbooking this photo and I printed it up using the Chroma filter on my Photos software on my Mac. And it's very similar to the Clarendon filter on Instagram. I just didn't put this photo through Instagram. I'm having a look at all of the wonderful, beautiful goodies from the Here Comes the Sun collection from Pretty Little Studio. Pretty Little Studio sent me these products a couple of weeks ago, and I'm just now getting around to using them. Oh my goodness, they were driving me crazy on my desk. They were so pretty. I just wanted to play with them, but I did not have any time for scrapbooking. So they teased me there on my desk for a long while, and today I made it my mission to use some of these beauties. Now, it can be overwhelming because there are a whole lot of items in each of the little packets of embellishments. You just saw me have a look through all of the die cut pieces. And what I decided to do was use mostly die cuts from the same set. And so I'm using the Love You to the Moon and Back set. That just kind of, it does a couple of things. There are a number of repeated elements, so stars of different sizes and hearts of different sizes, and then also some phrases. And using items from the same set makes it really easy for me to repeat elements and make my layout look nice and pulled together and cohesive. So I pulled out the 4x6 cards here. They're basically patterned cardstock on 4x6 cards, and I really, really love them. They're perfect for matting these little photos. My photo is printed up at 3.5 by 3.5, and then it's trimmed with a tiny little edge of white on it. So I matted it with one of those 4x6 cards, and then I'm going to layer a couple of different 4x6 cards here. I really liked that diagonal striped blue piece of pattern cardstock for my mat because it's really, really soft, but I wanted to add some contrast. So I took those stars, they're a black and white pattern in the same set. I'm just using all the same set of 4x6 pattern papers here. And then I decided to turn this one sideways so that I could get at the shape that I wanted, and I just trimmed it off so that I was interrupting the pattern instead of having the pattern end on its own at the top. Like I didn't want a white edge at the top of that pink and white patterned paper. And I did turn it sideways because you will see such a tiny little bit of that pattern showing that you won't notice that the popsicles are actually sideways. It's just for a hit of bright pink. And now I'm pulling up my edges to give me a little bit more dimension. It will cast a nice gray shadow in between those layers. And now here I am just waving hello from my sewing machine. And this is over in another area of my scrap room. And I just had to change the way that I had my pedal. Basically, it was going behind the table down a little hole in the tabletop, and because I've moved my room around, I had to move the pedal so that it actually plugs in and goes under the table from the front. So I'm running 2 straight stitches down the side of my photos where all those layers are, and then a zigzag stitch on the other side, just a little tiny bit, just for accent. So here's how the stitching looks. Oh, I love that little detail that it adds, and I decided to just leave the threads hanging for now. I will trim up some of them and leave some of them hanging. I really like the whimsical look and kind of really messy. I like to leave my threads when I do a mixed media type of a layout because it just adds more texture and interest to the page. Now I have this all on a white piece of cardstock from American Crafts, and it's this particular white cardstock has a bit of a blue cast to it, so I am going to gesso it, both to get rid of the blue cast and also to allow me to do some mixed media on it. I was thinking I wasn't entirely sure that I would be doing mixed media on this, but I didn't want the paper to have such a blue hue, so I gessoed it, and then once it was gessoed, it was just so easy to pull out some mixed media supplies and go ahead and do that. So that's what I did. I just use a very inexpensive palette knife there, just a plastic one, and reuse like just a gift card that I keep using over and over again. I always try to clean the gesso off of my nonstick mat quickly because it is easier. It will come off of a nonstick mat, but it's much easier to come off when it's still wet. And then I'm also going to take it off of my gray cutting mat there. It's not actually cutting mat, but my grid mat there that I use for my work surface as well, so that it doesn't get stained. And now I just put that on my garbage can to dry it. My garbage can is my drying surface. As long as it's not overflowing, it makes a good horizontal surface that isn't usually used for anything else, and I don't mind if it gets some gesso on it. So that's another piece of white cardstock that you saw there that I was going to compose on, but then I think I've decided that I'm just going to go ahead. I've spread such a small amount of gesso on there just because I used the credit card to move it around. It was on there on a really, really fine layer. And so it dried almost immediately. At least it dried enough for me to do some more mixed media on. So these are some gelatos. You see I have my whole thing of colorful gelatos out there. And I'm using the paper smooshing technique to add a little bit of light blue. This is called Aqua Dolce. And as you can see, it really doesn't have very much of an impact when I use the color smooshing technique with this. So then I decided to go a little bit heavier handed by applying the gesso directly onto my page and then wetting it with a wet paintbrush and just moving it around. Basically, I wanted to make a little square in the middle, or a large square in the middle. The color of gelato I'm using here is Iced Pear, which is a really pretty green color. And I like how that looks. I really like a swatch of color in the middle like that, but it's a little bit too subtle. I did want it to be subtle, but I need some accents on here. Like I need something with a little bit more color because all of the items I'm going to be placing on this layout have really vivid color. So this is Vibes from Shimmers, and the color is Hermit the Frog, and it's a really bright citrusy green color. And it has a little bit of shimmer to it, which is very, very pretty. And I just sprinkled that randomly in the center because I'm not sure how my design is going to go at this point. I don't know if it's going to be a diagonal or a ledge, like mostly horizontal or what. But I did decide, because there was this section up at the top that had the gesso. See, you can see actually where the gesso ends. It didn't have gesso on it, and I didn't like how you could see some of that bluish toned white underneath. So I just covered it with gelato and wet it, even though it sticks differently to the plain paper than it does to the gessoed paper. I don't mind that at all. I'm doing some multitasking here as I dry my spritz, my little sprinkles. I was just picking out some other colors. I picked Sky from Mr. Huey's, but first I decided to put some white Mr. Huey's on first. And this takes a really long time to dry. And I actually don't mind if I mix these two colors together, the white and the sky. If they land in the same place and mix a little bit, it's just going to make a lighter color blue, and that's okay. So I really love how the sky adds quite a bit of contrast to the splatters on this page. So I have a little accent up in the top left-hand corner, and then a main place in the middle that's basically square. And that's going to be where my photo is. And then I'll either put a title or some journaling or the date or something up in the top left-hand corner. At least that's my plan for now. So take a look at how this background looks so far. I love how the sky blue adds such a dark element to the splatters. I'm really liking how those look. And I decided to go ahead and grab my thread. This is upholstery thread, so it is quite a bit thicker than regular thread. And it also holds its circular shape, which I quite like. I like that it doesn't get quite as messy as regular thread gets. And I'm just making these large bundles by kind of wrapping it around a group of fingers to make it. Basically, I want it to be larger circles than what it naturally is. Like naturally, it's only about the size of the spool. So I like how that looks. Now, how I'm going to get those to stick is I'm basically just putting 2 blobs of mono multi-adhesive on the back of my photo, and then I'm just placing the photo on top of those 2, I guess, mounds of thread, or, messy bunches of thread. And then I just leave it dry. And because it's on a nonstick mat, it's not going to really dry. And also because it's Tombow Mono multi-adhesive, it doesn't really dry anyways. It dries to a sticky, tacky type of a finish. And that would be fine to place on my layout, but I'm not actually ready to place it on my layout. So you saw me just cover it there with a little scraps of waxed paper. That's just so that I don't get little blobs of that half-dried mono multi. It's super sticky. And whenever I use Tombow Mono multi, I always just want to be very careful that I don't get the half dry or liquid glue anywhere on my surface because it's super sticky and very, what am I trying to say? It's well, anyways, it's stubborn. So now I'm ready to put it on my page. So I added some more Tombow Mono multi, and because that'll take a while to dry, I also added some dry adhesive, just some tape runner. And I'm just going to fluff up my edges because they got kind of pressed down a little bit. And you'll notice that at the last minute, I did rotate my paper around a little bit so that accent place is, instead of in the top corner, it's in the bottom left-hand corner instead of in the top left-hand corner. And so now I'm just going to start composing this page. And one of the things that I really love about this Here Comes the Sun collection is that every single thing in the whole darn collection is stunningly gorgeous. So you really can't go wrong. I mean, I'm not using any fancy design principles here at all. I'm just plopping stuff down on the page. And, you know, even things that I wouldn't normally look good, they look good because of the products are just so pretty. It's just so pretty that you can't go wrong. Like seriously, just put stuff on the page. It doesn't matter where. So what I've decided to do is go with a diagonal layout here. So I have some large elements at the top with the love you and the heart and the sun. And then I tried to balance it with some large elements at the bottom as well, with the star and then the squiggly circle, which the squiggly circle is going to be a place for a flare badge to live. And so I'm not too worried that the two large elements in the bottom corner or in the lower half of the page on the right hand side, I'm not too worried that those are both like non-colorful items, because I'll put a flare badge there and then we'll be all good. Whereas, see, on the top, the two large elements are the sun and the heart, and they're both colorful items. So normally I would want to be careful about balancing those two things out, but because I plan to use a flare badge, I'm not too worried about it. And I'm using Stampin' Up! Dimensional adhesive behind all of my stars so that all of the stars on this page will be popped up. And I have to cut some of the adhesive because some of these stars are really tiny. And what that does is it just casts a little bit of a gray shadow behind my stars. I decided to make all of the hearts be flat and the stars be popped up. There's no right or wrong way. You don't have to make all of one item be the same. You can vary, have some stars popped up and some hearts popped up. It doesn't really matter. I just decided to do it this way. So I went a little overboard with adhesive. Once you put adhesive on one of the little arms of the stars, you kind of, I don't know, I kind of felt like I had to put little adhesive on on all of the arms once I put it on one of the arms. So anyhow, you really don't need that much foam adhesive for these things, but that's what I did. And so again, I'm putting the hearts down flat and popped up the stars. I really like how that looks. Even from here, you can see a little bit of a shadow cast by those stars. It's quite nice. And then I decided not to use that yellow banner behind the word family. It was just a little bit too distracting. So here, this is pretty much my layout at this point, but I decided that I wanted to have some splatter that kind of follows the diagonal line of the embellishments. So I added some of the exact same colors of splatter. I added some of the green. Again, that's Hermit the Frog by Vibes from Shimmers. And then Sky by Mr. Huey from Studio Calico. And it seemed to want to land everywhere except for on my layout, so I'm glad I put down that mat. And that's just a non-stick mat. I think it's from Heidi Swap. And I'm really liking how this looks. I'm going to put some layers of washi tape in behind my layers, and when I do so, my knuckle on my left hand smooshed one of the really pretty blobs of ink on the heart, and so I'm going to have to go back and fix that. The ink is still not dry. It's because it's on gesso, it's not sopping into the paper the way that it typically does, which helps it to dry quite a bit faster. And so it's taking a very, very long time for all those ink splatters to dry, but they do dry eventually. Even the white tends to dry for me. I know some people have trouble with the white. So I am definitely looking for a colorful flare badge for that side there, as I mentioned, because that helps to balance all of the color that's on the top of the page. I also have the stickers. There you go. So I decided to put a flare badge on top of that place where I made the mistake with my knuckle. And so that's what that popsicle flare badge is covering, one of my smeared ink splats. And then I also decided to use a colorful one right here. I think this one has a heart, or no, it says a saying. Let me grab my layout. It says, "You make me happy when skies are gray." And so now I don't want to forget that I do plan to use those little teeny weeny phrases and also one of the labels. But first, I'm going to write out my title. The title is going to be Upper Clements Park, which is the name of the park we were at. I'm not going to be doing any journaling on this one because basically I don't have much to say about this photo. It's just, I think that the photo really does capture the moment. You can see my husband furthest in and then both of my kids, and they're riding the horses. I was sitting on one of those benches that goes behind the horses, and it's a candid shot. They didn't know I was taking their photos, and I just really love the colors. I love the horses, and it was just a fun moment that we captured. I don't really need to say anything about it other than just seeing it, and so I'm not planning to do any journaling about it. I do plan to scrapbook another page about our trip to Upper Clements Park, and that one will likely have a little bit more journaling on it. I do like to tell stories with my pages, but I am more of a visual storyteller than I am a verbal storyteller. So I do like my picture to capture most of the mood and story, if at all possible. Just because I give a lot of thought to why that is, because I am a journaler. I do write a lot. But I think that scrapbooking is separate from my verbal life. I think I've decided. I have a really verbal job. I talk a lot and listen to people a lot. And so I think when I scrapbook, I like it to be just not so verbal. I like it to be very visual. And so that's just the way I am. If I wanted to put more journaling on this, I might put it kind of below where the word family is. I might lift up those threads and do some journaling and then underline it. But I'm not going to. So I started at the bottom, and I wanted this title to overlap with the heart washi tape that kind of anchors this title to the bottom of the page. And then the flower growing out of it also kind of looks like it's growing out of the ground, like those flowers are kind of part of the ground line. And then I also wanted the flower and the star that I added to overlap the letters, but not without impairing your ability to read it. And then I did pop up the star because it is a star and all the other stars on the page are popped up. So that's what I did. Now, what's happening off screen here is I'm looking for a blue pen that I can underline this title with. And all of my permanent blue pens that are not very smudgy are yucky colors of blue, or they're more of a purple than a blue. This pen that I'm using is one that will work on these stickers, but I had to be very careful. It would smear if I touched it too soon, so I did have to let it dry. Now, here are those tiny little phrase stickers from the same collection. They're so pretty. I love them so much. So I'm putting them all over the page, and in many cases, I'm overlapping them over the hearts, and then sometimes I'm overlapping them over something else or just floating them out on the page like I am with this one right here by the star. And that's another repeated element that shows up in both clusters, although only one of them is going to show up in the bottom cluster. So there's sort of 3 clusters here. There's 2 main clusters of embellishment and then this little secondary cluster right here where my title is. And now I want to use a roller date stamp on one of these labels, and I picked a label that wasn't well represented down. I definitely didn't want a pink label because there's plenty of pink down there with the letters for Upper Clements Park. So I wanted it to be either blue or green. I went with green. And now I'm just, I had to check the date, and now I'm just stamping it out with StazOn ink. I had to stamp it twice because the first time it didn't do a good job. I thought about putting a flare badge down there, but it's going to throw off the balance of the page, so this page is fine with just 2 flare badges on it. And then I just moved Believe so that it didn't look so, I don't know, it looked kind of too contrived or something where it was before, so I moved it up to there so it would look a little bit more random. And now here are the close-ups for this page. I love how you see how you can actually see the paint marks of the gesso. You can see the brush stroke, that they're not really brush strokes, but where I applied the gesso in a really quick way. I love the detail that leaves. It's just a really subtle white on white kind of a look, and I love it. Sometimes I will gesso my background even if I don't do mixed media on it, just to get that kind of whitewashed look. White tone on tone, and you can see where the different layers of the gesso overlap each other. I really love that look. So as I mentioned, this page was a bit of a no-brainer because these supplies really could scrapbook themselves. I really believe that a monkey could totally make something look good with these supplies because they're just so beautiful. I love it. So next you will get to see some photos of this page. Thank you so much for watching. I will have some more scrapbooking process videos in the weeks and days coming up. I do tend to slow down my rate of scrapbooking over the summer just because we tend to be on the go a little bit more as a family. I have a couple of other things to share with you guys in the next couple of days, probably later on this week or on the weekend as well. So keep an eye on my channel for a couple of different videos as well as some process videos coming up in the near future. Take care and have a really great scrappy week.